All right, today we are joined by Governor Wes Moore from the great state of Maryland, my home state, and we're very excited to welcome you in, Governor. Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about energy bills. Obviously, it's become a big topic. This wasn't an issue when you were first running for governor, when you first took office, but it's become a really hot issue over the last year or so. A lot of folks are seeing their bills rise exponentially in some cases. And I'm just curious, as you're going around the state and as you're hearing from folks, what's your message to them to tell them what you're trying to do to address rising energy bills?
Yeah, I mean, I know for far too many families across Maryland and also, frankly, across the country, we're seeing that these utility bills. It's not just that they're high, but over the past year and a half, they just been rising at an extraordinary number. I mean, over 15% in the past year. I mean, I hear from everyone from our neighbors to my own mom, who talks about how just in the past year that her bills have jumped hundreds of dollars for energy, and she doesn't understand what's going on. And so the thing that I've continued to say is that, while people not just in Maryland, but around the country have seen this, that I am making sure that we're taking aggressive action, that we can actually ease the pressure and actually deliver some immediate relief to Marylanders on their utility bills. I actually passed legislation that it's really comprehensive legislation that both gives hundreds of dollars of immediate relief to all Marylanders on the cost of their energy bills, but also works to address the long term systemic energy challenges that we're facing. I led a bipartisan group of governors to the White House and really worked to hold PJM's the grid operator for the region hold their feet to the fire on these rising costs and demanding that they act faster, that they can do more to really strengthen the grid and get more projects online, and really also then pushed and focused on how the White House has got to stop canceling the projects that for the state of Maryland. We want to generate more Maryland energy, more in state energy generation, which means focusing on things that are quicker and cleaner and cheaper. And that includes how we're looking at solar and wind and battery storage, et cetera. Urging the federal administration to stop looking at this like an ideology, which it is not, because I do believe in an all of the above energy approach. And so while I know that no state can fully control what either PJM does or what Washington does, I know that in Maryland, we're going to continue applying pressure to actually deliver real relief for our people.
So you covered a lot there that I want to dive into, and let's start with PJM. I think more people know those three letters than they did a year or 2 years ago, and
Yes.
you are one of the governors leading the push to kind of maybe change how they operate. There's a lot of frustration with PJM. I wonder if you could speak to some of your efforts in a little bit more detail. I know you were at their gathering back in May, and talk a little bit about maybe the price cap and the things that you're doing specifically with PJM to try to lower bills or keep bills from rising faster in Maryland.
Yeah. So you're right. So for people who might be wondering, so what is PJM? They are the regional grid operator. And so they are helping to establish the maintenance and the frequency of projects on the grid, and not just for Maryland, and not even just for our neighbors, but also for 13 different states. And so PJM has a significant amount of influence on which projects get greenlit and which ones do not. And so I personally went to PJM and gave a talk with them about how we needed them to extend the capacity market price cap through the end of the decade, to making sure that this was going to help to save tens of millions of Americans across the region, including millions of Marylanders, over $27 billion on their energy bills. That, said that we were willing to work with them to be able to greenlight these different projects. And, the things that I was really asking them for is I needed them to deliver on the reliability backstop procurement and get that done on schedule. And basically what that means, that's helping to ensure that all of our new energy resources can actually have a steady pipeline in. That they needed to make sure that they could clear what is called the interconnection queue, which is basically the queue of all the projects that are laid out, and making sure we're approving, affordable energy options and new energy resources faster. And also doing things like, as they're looking at the data centers, making sure that if there's data centers that are fueling the surge in electricity demand, that we have very real guidelines and guardrails for these data centers. Because for too long, before I came on board, these data centers are basically writing their own rules. That has got to stop. And so these are some of the things that we're really pushing PJM to do and to really focus on.
So I do want to ask you more about data centers and AI. That's the other thing that we hear about constantly, and how they're driving up. There's so much demand for energy that the impacts. People are very concerned about how that will impact their household. You've talked about trying to prevent that, and we're seeing your fellow governor in New York just signed a moratorium, first in the nation. What's your view on that? And also, generally, what are the kind of parameters around which you're thinking about AI and data centers? Because while we do need to keep folks' bills from going up, there's also a need to build out AI and compete internationally. So, how do you kind of balance everything?
Well, I've said for months that I've been very clear about the high expectations that I have for any of these critical infrastructure projects, to include data centers inside of my state. And I said that they need to pay for their own energy and pay for any of their own improvements. That taxpayers cannot and will not pay for what they are doing. That they needed to hire local workers and engage local communities inside of this work. That they couldn't just determine where they were going to be. And if a local community had an issue, that was something that would actually be able to say that that project cannot go forward. And the third piece is that they needed to confine and they needed to confer with all environmental guidelines. That all those things cover the cost of their power and their improvements, hire local workers, and engage local communities, and also making sure that they are going by all environmental guidelines. Those were my prerequisites, and we have canceled projects because they have not gone by those prerequisites. And so I think that for every phase of every project, every developer, every person who wants to do that, they need to know that all of those things must be met. I understand that there are local jurisdictions who want this and who are actively seeking data centers, and I understand that. But what I am saying is the state needs to have involvement, because when I first became the governor, there were about 40 to 50 data centers inside of the state of Maryland. So this was already something that was happening inside of Maryland when I first came on board. The challenge that I saw, and we saw it particularly in places like Northern Virginia, which became the epicenter of data center development on the globe, was that the data centers were basically writing their own rules. And that had to stop. And so we needed to take a new type of approach, which we've done in Maryland, to be able to say that we want to make sure we're focusing on affordability and reliability of energy. We want to make sure that we're supporting critical infrastructure, but we don't want all these things to be in conflict with one another either.
So you mentioned the Trump administration and the canceled projects, and so specifically, I want to ask you about offshore wind in Maryland, how that makes up an important piece of the pie. You also talked about, generating more energy in Maryland. What's that fight looking like right now? And how do you kind of view, um, how are you dealing with the administration's posture towards clean energy more broadly, and how that's
Yeah.
affecting the current environment?
So, one thing I've been crystal clear about is, I believe in an all the above energy approach. Right? I believe that nuclear has to be an option. I believe that solar and wind and batteries all have to be options, that all options must be on the table, because we have to be able to do more to strengthen the grid, increase energy options, increase supply, because that's also what's going to bring price down, and also make sure you're not compromising reliability. The challenge that I've seen from the Trump administration is they seem to think about energy like it's an ideology, and it's not for me. That the reason I support the completion of the offshore wind projects that Maryland has, is not because it's an ideology. It's because I continue to fight for clean, homegrown energy and the jobs and investments that come with it. And I know for the state of Maryland, that is one amongst the quickest and the cleanest and the cheapest ways for us to be able to strengthen the grid and get more energy options on board. And so what I'm asking from the Trump administration is stop looking at this like a political ideology and start just looking at it as what for each individual state is the most effective way for them to be able to strengthen their grid and get more energy options. And for me and for Maryland, an all the above approach is the smartest approach that we should be taking. And that's going to be the fastest way to increase reliability and lower costs for our people.
Final question, a little bit of a lighter question. You're obviously a very well-known public figure at this point, but what is something that would surprise our audience, or maybe something that more people should know about you?
Oh wow. I think one thing that that my family knows well, that maybe a lot of folks outside the family don't, is one of my passion points is cooking. I swear that if I were not being a governor, I think one of the jobs that I would love to have is being a chef. And I love experimenting with different with different items. I love Jamaican food is probably my favorite thing in the world to cook. But I have a dream of, like, that I don't know if you know that show, like Chopped, on the Food Network or like that. I think my dream show to be on will be on Chopped, just getting a basket of some different items and being like, have at it, because I think I actually pretty well at it.
Well, how often are you cooking these days?
Not as often as I would like, actually.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to get on the phone with Chops, their producer, and see what we can do.
There we go. There we go. We
All
should have,
right,
we should
Governor.
have a Chopped Governor's edition.
I support that, and I look forward to seeing how we can make that come to fruition.
Let's do it.
Governor Moore, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, and keep up the good work in Maryland.
Thank you. God bless. Thanks so much, Chris.